guys, I'm Jamie, and welcome to my podcast. Today I will be interviewing Aristotle, the Greek philosopher. Thank you for joining me today, Aristotle. Why don't you start by telling our listeners a bit about yourself?
Thank you, Jamie, for having me on the podcast today. As you already mentioned, I'm a Greek philosopher, and I was born in 384 BC in Stygia, Greece. I was a student of Plato when I was 17, and by the time I was 37, I was a teacher to Alexander the Great. I write about a multitude of different topics, some including natural sciences, philosophy, linguistics, economics, politics, psychology, physics, and the arts. Not to brag, but I did create a baseline for most of today's scientific knowledge. I even created Aristotelian physics, including my own law of physics.
That's amazing. I never knew you had such a wide variety of knowledge. Would you be able to expand a little bit more on your childhood and upbringing?
Totally. I was born in the city of Stygia in northern Greece during a time called the Classical period. My dad, Nicomachus, unfortunately passed away when I was a child, so I was brought up by a guardian. My guardian was Proxenus of Atarneus. At 17, I joined Plato's Academy in Athens, where I stayed there as a student until the age of 37, and then I became a teacher to Alexander the Great.
Wow, thank you for telling our listeners more about your childhood. To continue this podcast, I would like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind. To start off, could you explain to me how your work is seen in the world today?
Focusing specifically on my Aristotelian physics, I was right about a few ideas, but Newton's laws of physics have since replaced mine. I'm a little upset about it, but I can admit his laws of motion are better than mine.
Can you give an example of how Newton's laws differ from yours?
Of course. My physics is more concerned with the behavior of things that are already on Earth, where Newton's physics is more than just what's on Earth and works to understand the motion of the universe as well.
Interesting. Thank you for explaining. Okay, on to the next question. What is your view on the relationship between religion and science?
Honestly, I see religion as just another obstacle in my development of scientific knowledge. I don't believe in an infinite regress. However, Christianity ultimately has taken over Greek science.
Would you describe religion as a challenge you had to face in your findings? If so, can you please expand on that?
Of course, I saw religion as a challenge in my findings. I've always said that by nature man seeks knowledge. So in order to satisfy man's natural desire for knowledge of religion is ultimately what science aims for. However, I think that religion and science don't coexist, and this is where the challenges come from. So instead of looking at religion, I choose to look at the natural world and to gain my scientific knowledge from material causes.
That's good to know. Next question I would like to ask you is, what do you find to be your most interesting finding?
One thing that I found interesting about my findings is that it ended up influencing the scientific method, making me one of the founding leaders of the scientific method. I came up with measurement and observation, which is the foundation of what science is built on now. I knew that in order to understand abstract thoughts, there had to be reasoning and evidence to support the thoughts through real-world findings.
Moving on from this happy note, let's talk about your biggest regret. What is a missed opportunity you had while working in the field?
Right. I had a lot of missed opportunities due to my poor experimenting skills. I was a great observer, but a poor experimenter. I could never get past my preconceived ideas, and ultimately I let them influence my observations. More specifically, I thought that the motion about effect was a form of visual inertia. Visual inertia being a tendency to continue to see things moving in the same direction because of the inertia of the physical movement stimulated in the brain. My biggest regret is letting my bias prevent me from doing proper experiments on my theory. I could have discovered so much more if I had an open mind.
It's okay, you still made some influential findings in science. I have one last question for you before I let you go. What kind of response did you get when you first presented your discovery?
Honestly, people were not shocked. It was actually really common for people to accept my findings. People tended to just blindly follow my ideas without questioning. However, modern scholars' opinions differ in their opinions on my findings. They believe that my physics findings were not sufficiently based on empirical observations for it to be considered scientific. But the joke is on them because some of my modern scientific methods stemmed from me.
That's crazy. Unfortunately, our time together has ended. Thank you so much, Aristotle, for coming here today to talk to me.
Of course, it was my pleasure too.
This episode has been a production of the Capistrano Valley Christian Schools Podcast Network. Capistrano Valley Christian Schools is a Christian JK through 12 school in San Juan Capistrano, California. Be sure to check out, subscribe to, and leave a review of this show and the other shows on our network on your podcast player of choice. Doing so supports the school community in a multitude of ways. For more information about the CVCS Podcast Network or any of our other shows, check out cvcs.org or email podcasts@cvcs.org. On behalf of the whole network, this is Mr. Jasper saying thank you again for listening and stay tuned for more.